August 25, 1944, Cherbourg Harbor, Normandy, France. The wrench slipped from Sergeant William Henderson's grease-stained hands as he stared at the endless convoy forming before him. The British said these trucks would fail. They said the design was flawed, underpowered, worthless for modern warfare. Now Henderson watched as 6,000 of them prepared to attempt the impossible, to supply General Patton's racing Third Army across 400 miles of devastated French countryside. The letters GMC stamped on the hood stood for General Motors Corporation. But to the 75% African-American drivers climbing into those cabs exhausted before their journey even began, those letters meant something else entirely. They meant survival. They meant the difference between victory and defeat. They meant the lifeline that would keep Allied armies pushing toward Germany. Henderson wiped the sweat and grease from his forehead. The trucks gleamed dully in the gray morning light, packed bumper to bumper, the rumble of idling engines echoing across the harbor like a low mechanical heartbeat. Each truck was a gamble. Each truck carried tons of fuel, ammunition, food, and hope. Weeks of planning, shipping delays, and logistical nightmares had led to this moment. British engineers had doubted them. Some American officers hesitated quietly behind maps and reports. But here they were, sitting at the edge of history, ready to roll. As the first drivers climbed into the cabs, Henderson thought about the roads ahead. Bomb-cratered highways, smashed bridges, and the constant threat of German ambush. Every mile would test the trucks, the drivers, and the very idea that a single, unwanted vehicle design could redefine supply in modern war. And as the convoy began to inch forward, the hum of engines grew louder, a chorus of steel and determination. No one could predict how many trucks would reach the end of the line. But for Henderson and his drivers, failure was not an option. The convoy stretched as far as Henderson's eyes could see. 6,000 trucks, each a GMC CCKW, lined the port like a metallic river, engines idling, horns silent but ready. Every driver knew the stakes. The Red Ball Express wasn't just a supply route, it was a lifeline. A rolling testament to ingenuity, perseverance, and sheer grit. General Patton's Third Army was moving fast, and supplies had to keep pace. One missed shipment, one breakdown, one destroyed bridge could stall the advance and cost lives. Henderson climbed into his cab, the smell of diesel fuel thick in the air. He checked the gauges, adjusted the mirrors, and tapped the dashboard for luck. Around him, the African-American drivers exchanged nods, quiet words of encouragement, or a small chuckle to break the tension. They had been trained for months, some in America, some under fire in North Africa. But nothing had prepared them for the devastation that awaited across northern France. Bombed-out highways, craters, and shattered towns marked the path ahead. German snipers and lurking artillery weren't the only threats. The terrain itself could swallow a truck whole. As the convoy rolled out of Cherbourg Harbor, Henderson felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Each truck carried fuel for tanks that could change the course of battles, ammunition that could keep soldiers alive, and food for men marching relentlessly toward Germany. The British skepticism seemed almost distant now, drowned out by the synchronized roar of engines and the rhythmic crunch of tires on broken asphalt. Every mile was a challenge, every delivery a victory in its own right. The convoy moved in organized chaos. Drivers communicated with hand signals, horns, and radios when possible. They navigated around collapsed bridges, detours through muddy fields, and towns still smoldering from weeks of conflict. Henderson glanced at the dashboard compass, 100 miles to cover, and daylight was slipping. Fatigue already gnawed at him, but there was no time to rest. Supplies had to reach the front lines, and failure could mean disaster for the entire army. Some trucks began to falter almost immediately. Engines overheated under the strain of heavy loads. Transmissions groaned under the uneven terrain. Yet the design of the GMC CCKW proved resilient. Its 6x6 drive, though criticized by engineers and generals alike, allowed it to climb steep, cratered roads that standard vehicles couldn't navigate. Even the underpowered engines, once a point of contention, churned reliably when paired with careful handling. Henderson felt a flicker of pride. This unwanted design was proving its worth. Mile by grueling mile, along the route, Allied soldiers repaired bridges, cleared debris, and directed traffic. But the Red Ball Express drivers bore the brunt of the challenge. Henderson watched fellow drivers maneuver through mud pits, swerve around shell holes, and nudge trucks that had become stuck. Every successful maneuver reinforced what they already knew. These trucks, and the men driving them, were indispensable. By nightfall, the convoy had covered over 100 miles, yet the hardest miles were still ahead. Henderson parked near a makeshift supply depot, allowing his truck to cool while he and others performed maintenance checks. The crews worked methodically, their hands black with grease, eyes tired but vigilant. Every repair mattered. Every mile completed tonight meant tanks would have fuel, soldiers would have ammunition, and General Patton's army could keep moving. As Henderson leaned against the cab, staring at the darkened horizon, he understood something profound. The GMC CCKW wasn't just a truck. It was a symbol of determination, innovation, and the ability to defy expectations. Those who had doubted it had never seen it in action. And now, as the engines cooled and the drivers prepared for the next grueling stretch, one truth became undeniable. This truck nobody wanted was about to become the backbone of one of the most daring logistical operations in military history. The night was thick with fog as the convoy resumed its march. Henderson's headlights cut swaths of white through the mist, revealing twisted remnants of bombed-out villages and roads cratered from shelling. Every mile carried the threat of disaster, not only from enemy fire, but from the treacherous terrain itself. One wrong turn, one misjudged pothole, and a fully loaded truck could tumble into a ditch or disappear into a muddy ravine. The GMC CCKW trucks, once mocked for their unconventional design, now proved their mettle. Their 6x6 all-wheel drive allowed them to power through conditions that would have immobilized lighter vehicles. Yet even the strongest machines were tested by fatigue and weight. Engines grew hot, transmissions groaned under strain, and drivers fought the steering with every ounce of strength. Henderson wiped sweat from his brow as he guided his truck over a collapsing bridge, the wood groaning under the massive load. A moment of silence hung in the air, broken only by the creak of beams and the rumble of engines. Behind him, convoys struggled to maintain pace. Radio messages crackled with updates. Some trucks stalled, some had to detour around impassable sections, and a few would never make it. But Henderson focused on his truck, on the rhythm of the road, and on the faces of the men around him. The African-American drivers who had been underestimated by commanders and doubted by engineers now proved themselves vital. Every successful mile was a testament not only to the GMC CCKW but to the courage, skill, and determination of the men behind the wheel. By dawn, the convoy reached a small crossroads near a destroyed village. German snipers were rumored to have been in the area, and the tension was palpable. Soldiers with rifles ran along the convoy, keeping watch for movement in the shadows. Henderson felt the truck vibrate beneath him, as if it too sensed the danger. Every bump in the road, every rattling crate, made him grip the wheel tighter. Suddenly, a distant crack of gunfire echoed across the countryside. One of the trucks ahead swerved violently to avoid the threat. Henderson's heart raced as he maneuvered through the chaos, relying on the truck's powerful drivetrain and robust suspension to maintain control. He realized that these vehicles, once dismissed as flawed and underpowered, were the lifeline holding the advance together. They were more than machines, they were shields against chaos, carriers of hope and survival. As the convoy pressed on, word came through the radio. Supplies were arriving at depots just in time. Patton's tanks could refuel, ammunition would reach the front line, and troops would have food to sustain their push. Henderson allowed himself a brief sense of relief. The GMC CCKWs, against all expectations, had proven their worth. The British engineers who doubted them would never see this reality. But the men on the ground, those who had faced mud, shell craters, and enemy fire, knew the truth. By nightfall, the convoy had covered nearly half its intended distance. Exhausted drivers performed quick maintenance checks, greasing joints, checking fluids, and repairing minor damage. The trucks had been tested relentlessly, yet the fleet remained operational. Henderson leaned against his cab, surveying the convoy stretching into the darkness. Each truck was a lifeline, each mile a battle won against skepticism, nature, and the remnants of the enemy. Henderson understood the significance. These trucks weren't just transporting supplies, they were carrying the momentum of the Allied advance, the lifeblood of Patton's armored divisions, and the proof that innovation and determination could defy even the harshest doubts. The GMC CCKW, the truck nobody wanted, was now proving it could carry an army toward victory, 1 mile at a time. By the 4th day of the Red Ball Express, exhaustion had begun to take its toll. Drivers rubbed sore muscles, eyes bloodshot from long hours behind the wheel, and hands blackened with grease. Henderson felt it himself, the aches, the fatigue, the constant tension, but there was no time to rest. Supplies had to reach the front lines, and every delay could cost lives. The convoy stretched for miles, a metallic ribbon snaking through the French countryside. Roads once sturdy were now torn apart by constant shelling, aerial bombardment, and retreating German forces. Some stretches were barely passable, mud and rubble threatening to swallow the heaviest trucks. Henderson guided his CCKW over a collapsed bridge, feeling the cab shudder with every plank that groaned under the weight of tons of fuel and ammunition. Around him, the synchronized rumble of engines was almost hypnotic, yet the danger was never far away. German pockets still lingered in the countryside. Sniper fire occasionally crackled through the air, and artillery strikes forced convoys to halt or reroute. Henderson's truck skirted a bomb crater that had swallowed 2 other vehicles earlier that morning. The drivers had grown accustomed to improvisation. Detours through muddy fields, shallow fording of streams, and hasty repairs under open skies. Every driver had learned to read the terrain, to anticipate danger, and to trust the truck beneath them. The GMC CCKW, once derided as underpowered and flawed, now proved its worth with every obstacle it overcame. During one particularly harrowing stretch, Henderson saw a fellow truck stuck deep in mud. Without hesitation, he reversed, attached a tow cable, and helped pull it free, saving both the vehicle and its precious cargo. Around him, the convoy had become a tightly knit unit, a brotherhood bound by shared exhaustion, skill, and a deep understanding of what was at stake. African-American drivers, who had been dismissed or underestimated by many officers, emerged as some of the most capable and fearless men on the route. Their knowledge of the trucks, combined with courage under fire, was ensuring the survival of the entire operation. By mid-afternoon, the convoy reached a destroyed town, debris littering the streets, bridges shattered, and shell craters threatening to derail trucks at every turn. Henderson navigated carefully, following engineers and soldiers who cleared paths, but the constant threat of ambush loomed. Even when German resistance was minimal, the terrain itself was a relentless enemy. Night fell, and Henderson pulled his truck into a makeshift supply depot. Crews worked under dim lanterns, performing maintenance checks, refueling, and repairing minor damage. Exhausted men moved methodically, aware that every repair counted, every mile achieved was vital. The convoy had become more than a supply line. It was a lifeline carrying the momentum of Patton's army forward. Henderson finally allowed himself a moment to reflect. The GMC CCKW trucks, once ridiculed by engineers and officers alike, had proven they could endure what no one thought possible. Every mile traveled, every cargo delivered, was a testament to ingenuity, determination, and sheer grit. The British critics who had doubted the design would never witness this transformation firsthand. But Henderson and the drivers knew the truth. The truck nobody wanted had become the backbone of one of the most daring logistical operations in military history. As he settled into the cab for a brief rest, Henderson glanced along the convoy stretching into the dark night. Engines quietly idling, ready to continue at first light. Each truck was a lifeline, each driver a guardian of supplies, and together they were defying every doubt, every obstacle, and every expectation. The Red Ball Express was more than a route. It was proof that courage, skill, and determination could turn skepticism into victory, 1 mile at a time. The morning air was thick with tension as the convoy rolled out once more. Henderson's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white, eyes scanning the battered road ahead. Overnight storms had left some sections flooded and churned into mud pits that threatened to trap even the most capable truck. The GMC CCKWs, resilient though they were, groaned under the stress. Engines smoked, gears rattled, and tires struggled for purchase on the uneven ground. Every mile now demanded vigilance, skill, and a touch of luck. As the convoy approached a narrow bridge spanning a swollen river, disaster struck. A fully loaded truck ahead faltered. Its tires spun helplessly in the mud. Drivers behind were forced to stop abruptly, forming a bottleneck that threatened to halt the entire operation. Henderson jumped out of his cab, grabbed a tow cable, and waded into the muck. With the help of nearby soldiers, they winched the truck free, the metal frame creaking under the strain. Sweat and grime coated Henderson's face, but the sense of accomplishment was palpable. One truck freed meant one more ton of supplies would reach the front lines. Mechanical failures became a constant companion. Radiators boiled over, clutches slipped, and suspension components cracked under the unrelenting load. Yet the drivers, mostly young men far from home, refused to yield. They repaired, improvised, and kept moving. African-American crews, often underestimated, displayed a level of skill and tenacity that astonished officers who had doubted them. Each repair was a small triumph, a quiet rebellion against skepticism, and a reinforcement of the GMC CCKW's reputation. Enemy resistance flared intermittently. A stray sniper round hit a fuel drum, setting a nearby truck ablaze. Henderson and a handful of drivers risked everything to push the burning vehicle aside, extinguishing the flames before catastrophe could spread. The danger was constant, but so was the resolve. The Red Ball Express was a lifeline for Patton's army, and failure was not an option. By midday, the convoy had lost several trucks to mechanical failure, accidents, and minor skirmishes. Yet the majority continued on, engines rumbling tirelessly across devastated highways. Henderson's cab vibrated under the strain, but the truck moved steadily forward, navigating bomb craters, collapsed roads, and hastily repaired bridges. Every mile covered was a testament to human determination, and the ingenuity of a truck once dismissed as flawed. At a temporary supply depot, crews performed rapid maintenance. Exhausted men worked in silence, replacing broken parts, topping off fluids, and patching tires. Each repaired truck returned to the convoy, ready to continue the relentless push. Henderson leaned against his cab, surveying the operation. The British critics, who had mocked the design, would never understand the true value of these machines. The GMC CCKW was more than a truck. It was the lifeblood of a mobile army, an engine of survival, and a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. As night fell, the convoy prepared for another stretch under darkness. The trucks were weary, the men exhausted, but hope and determination burned brightly. Every repaired vehicle, every mile completed, and every supply delivered reinforced a single truth. The truck nobody wanted had become the backbone of one of the most daring and critical logistical operations in modern warfare. And for Henderson and his fellow drivers, this was only the beginning. The sun rose over northern France, casting a pale light on the battered convoy. Henderson climbed into his GMC CCKW, exhaustion gnawing at every muscle, yet there was no pause in the relentless march. Overnight, the weather had turned against them. Rain-soaked roads were now rivers of mud, and shell-pocked highways had become treacherous quagmires. Every mile was a test of skill, machinery, and sheer determination. As the convoy advanced, trucks began to falter under the strain. Radiators overheated, brakes squealed, and axles groaned under tons of fuel, ammunition, and rations. Henderson's eyes scanned the horizon for trouble, knowing that one breakdown could ripple across the convoy, delaying supplies for Patton's advancing divisions. Drivers worked frantically, performing roadside repairs, tightening belts, and greasing joints to keep their trucks moving. The GMC CCKW, once dismissed as flawed, continued to prove itself with remarkable resilience. Suddenly, a section of the convoy approached a crumbling bridge over a swollen river. Henderson could see the treacherous gap ahead. Several trucks had already attempted the crossing and stalled halfway, their loads threatening to tip them into the raging water. Henderson gritted his teeth, guiding his vehicle with precision, careful not to lose traction. He could hear the splashes behind him as other drivers fought to maneuver their trucks across. One wrong move, one hesitation, and disaster would strike. Yet, the sturdy design of the CCKW, its 6.6 drive and powerful engine, allowed Henderson to push through. Enemy fire became more frequent. Snipers had been sighted along the road, and sporadic artillery shells exploded in the distance. Drivers ducked under incoming rounds, honking horns to warn others, and accelerating through dangerous zones. Henderson felt the adrenaline surge, muscles tensing as he navigated around wrecked trucks, fallen trees, and cratered terrain. Every challenge reinforced the growing reputation of the unwanted truck. Vehicles that British critics had derided as weak were now saving lives with each mile completed. By midday, fatigue and mechanical strain had taken their toll. Trucks were abandoned by the roadside, engines smoking or wheels sunk into mud. Henderson stopped to assist a fellow driver, crawling beneath a truck to repair a seized transmission. Sweat, grease, and grime coated him from head to toe. Around him, African-American crews, often underestimated, worked tirelessly, their skill and determination keeping the convoy operational. For these men, survival and duty were inseparable. Failure was not an option. As the convoy pushed forward, Henderson looked ahead at the devastated countryside, bombed-out villages, overturned tanks, and shattered bridges. Every mile gained was a victory, every delivery a lifeline. Soldiers at the front received fuel, ammunition, and food because of the trucks and the men who refused to quit. The GMC CCKW had become more than machinery. It was a lifeline, a symbol of ingenuity and perseverance in the face of near-impossible odds. By nightfall, Henderson parked at a temporary depot. Crews performed emergency maintenance, replaced damaged tires, and refueled for the next grueling stretch. The men were exhausted, yet the morale remained high. They had witnessed the CCKW trucks conquer mud, mechanical failures, and enemy fire. These trucks, once dismissed, had earned their place as the backbone of the Red Ball Express, proving that determination, skill, and ingenuity could defy expectations and keep an army moving. The morning mist barely lifted when Henderson fired up his GMC CCKW for another grueling day on the Red Ball Express. The convoy had grown thinner. Mechanical failures, mud traps, and minor skirmishes had claimed several trucks overnight. Yet the remaining drivers, their hands black with grease and eyes hollow from fatigue, pressed onward. The pace had to be maintained. Patton's Third Army was counting on every delivery to sustain its relentless push toward Germany. The roads ahead were a testament to the chaos of war. Craters gaped like hungry mouths. Bridges had been destroyed or weakened, and shell-shattered towns offered no shelter from the elements. Henderson's truck bumped and groaned over the uneven terrain, the engine struggling yet reliable. Every mile was a battle in itself. He glanced at the convoy stretching behind him. Trucks inching forward one by one, drivers alert, radio chatter crackling with updates on obstructions. Enemy sightings and breakdowns, enemy harassment intensified. Sniper fire forced some trucks to swerve dangerously close to embankments, while stray artillery rounds tore through nearby fields. Henderson ducked instinctively as a shell exploded on the far side of the road, sending dirt and debris flying. The GMC CCKW's rugged frame shook but remained intact. These trucks, once mocked for their perceived weakness, now carried men and supplies through scenarios that would have immobilized other vehicles. Henderson felt a quiet pride. The truck nobody wanted had become indispensable. A convoy leader signaled a detour through a partially flooded village. The water was deep and the mud thick, some trucks already stuck to their axles. Henderson guided his CCKW with precision, leveraging the six-wheel drive to maintain traction. Behind him, men shouted instructions, soldiers waded through muck to guide stuck vehicles, and mechanics scurried along the roadside performing quick repairs. Each successful maneuver, each freed truck, was a small triumph, a lifeline extended to the front lines. By mid-afternoon, chaos gave way to grim efficiency. Drivers had developed an almost instinctive understanding of their truck's limits, the nuances of French roads, and the signals of approaching danger. Henderson noted how African-American crews, often underestimated, demonstrated unmatched skill under these conditions. They improvised repairs, navigated treacherous terrain, and maintained speed despite exhaustion. Every truck that made it through meant fuel for tanks, ammunition for artillery, and food for marching soldiers. Every truck lost was a lesson in resilience. The convoy pressed on into a narrow canyon flanked by shell-cratered hills. Reports of German remnants in the area raised the stakes. Henderson's eyes darted to every shadow, every tree line, alert for snipers or hidden artillery. Suddenly, a nearby truck exploded, its fuel igniting in a bright flare. Henderson slammed on the brakes, the cab shaking violently. He watched as his fellow drivers executed evasive maneuvers, some pushing burning vehicles off the road to prevent a chain reaction. The tension was electric. Every driver knew that one wrong move could end lives and halt the supply chain. Nightfall finally arrived, but the convoy had survived another day. Henderson and his fellow drivers performed maintenance under lantern light, repairing axles, checking engines, and topping off fuel. Each truck returned to readiness. Each mile gained reaffirmed the importance of their mission. The GMC CCKW trucks had proven their mettle, navigating not only treacherous terrain, but enemy fire, mechanical failure, and doubt itself. The Red Ball Express depended on them, and in their hands, these once unwanted vehicles had become the lifeblood of Patton's advance, an enduring symbol of determination, ingenuity, and the quiet heroism of men and machines alike. The morning broke cold and gray over the French countryside. Henderson climbed into his GMC CCKW, every muscle stiff from hours behind the wheel. Yet the convoy had no choice but to move. Reports had come in. A crucial bridge further along the route had been partially destroyed by retreating German forces. Supplies for Patton's advancing divisions depended on their timely delivery. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on every driver, but especially on those at the front, like Henderson. The convoy wound its way through bombed-out towns and cratered roads. Mud and debris clung to tires and chassis, and rain threatened to turn fields into impassable quagmires. The GMC CCKWs, already praised for their resilience, were now being pushed to the absolute limit. Henderson felt the vibrations through the cab, the engine straining, the transmission groaning. Yet the truck held together, moving steadily forward with a determination that mirrored the men inside. As the convoy approached the damaged bridge, tension gripped the drivers. Engineers had marked weak sections, but the river below churned violently, and the bridge could give way under the weight of the fully loaded trucks. Henderson slowed, his eyes scanning the structure. A few trucks ahead carefully inched forward, creaking timbers bending under tons of fuel, ammunition, and rations. The roar of the engines mixed with the snapping of wood and the splash of water as some vehicles slid perilously close to the edge. Henderson maneuvered his truck with precise control, taking advantage of the six-wheel drive and high clearance. Behind him, other drivers followed his lead, their headlights cutting through the morning fog. Some trucks struggled, wheels spinning uselessly in the mud, requiring help from crews who waded in to push or tow them. Each truck that successfully crossed was a small triumph. Each mile gained brought the front lines one step closer to critical supplies. Enemy activity had increased. Snipers had been sighted along the hillsides, and artillery fire sporadically shook the ground. Henderson ducked instinctively as a shell exploded nearby, showering mud and debris over the road. Around him, drivers responded with split-second decisions, accelerating through danger, adjusting routes, or backing out of compromised positions. The chaos tested not only the trucks, but the skill and courage of the men inside. By mid-afternoon, fatigue weighed heavily on everyone. Henderson's hands were raw, his back stiff, but there was no room for hesitation. Another truck ahead stalled mid-bridge, its cargo precariously balanced. Mechanics rushed forward, improvising repairs under the constant threat of enemy fire. Henderson's eyes flicked along the convoy, noting the African-American crews who, despite exhaustion, moved with practiced efficiency. Their resourcefulness was saving not only their own lives, but the success of the entire operation. As evening fell, the convoy finally reached a temporary supply depot. Drivers performed emergency maintenance, inspected engines, and prepped for the next leg of the journey. Henderson leaned against his cab, staring at the line of trucks stretching into the dark horizon. Each vehicle told a story of survival, ingenuity, and relentless determination. The GMC CCKWs, once dismissed as flawed and underpowered, had repeatedly proven themselves essential, carrying the lifeblood of Patton's army across devastated landscapes, enemy threats, and near-impossible obstacles. The Red Ball Express had survived another day, and the truck nobody wanted had once again lived up to its name. Not through glamour or acclaim, but through reliability, resilience, and the courage of the men who drove it. For Henderson, the truth was clear. As long as these trucks moved, victory remained within reach. Rain had begun to fall in sheets as Henderson guided his GMC CCKW through the battered countryside. The convoy was thinner than ever, trucks abandoned by the roadside, engines smoking, drivers exhausted. Yet the Red Ball Express pressed onward. Supplies had to reach the front lines no matter the cost. Patton's army depended on every delivery, and failure was not an option. The roads were nearly impassable. Bomb craters filled with water, mud sucked at tires, and fallen trees blocked narrow passages. Henderson navigated each obstacle with precision, relying on the rugged design of the CCKW. The six-wheel drive gripped the churned-up earth. The suspension absorbed shocks that would have shattered lesser trucks, and the engine's steady roar kept him moving forward. Each successful mile was a small victory over the relentless chaos of war. Enemy activity was relentless. Snipers picked off drivers who hesitated, while artillery shells exploded nearby, shaking the ground and rattling cargo. Henderson ducked instinctively, eyes scanning the foggy horizon for threats. A truck ahead was struck by a stray shell, igniting a fuel drum and sending a fiery plume into the air. Drivers responded instantly, maneuvering around the inferno while mechanics ran forward with extinguishers, risking their lives to prevent the fire from spreading. Each rescue, each evasive maneuver, showcased the bravery of the men and the durability of the GMC CCKWs. The convoy faced its ultimate challenge when a river crossing loomed, a makeshift pontoon bridge barely capable of supporting the fully loaded trucks. Henderson's truck led the line, inching forward slowly, wheels trembling on unstable planks. Behind him, drivers held their breath, engines idling anxiously, hands tight on steering wheels. The bridge creaked ominously, groaning under the weight. But Henderson relied on the truck's rugged frame and precise handling to reach solid ground. One by one, the convoy followed, each truck a testament to resilience and courage. By midday, fatigue had reached its peak. Henderson's back ached, his hands were blistered, but he pressed on. Crews performed quick roadside repairs, patched leaky radiators, and replaced broken parts under the threat of enemy fire. African-American drivers, often underestimated, demonstrated skill and bravery that kept the convoy moving despite near-impossible conditions. The trucks were more than vehicles. They were lifelines carrying fuel, ammunition, and food essential for Patton's advance. As night fell, Henderson parked at a temporary depot, surveying the convoy stretching into the darkness. Exhausted men moved methodically, repairing trucks, refueling, and preparing for the next day's grueling journey. The GMC CCKWs had faced mud, flood, enemy fire, and mechanical strain, and yet they continued to deliver. Henderson leaned against the cab, reflecting on the convoy's journey. These trucks, once dismissed as flawed, had become heroes of the Red Ball Express. Every mile traversed, every delivery completed, was proof that determination, skill, and innovation could overcome the harshest challenges. The truck nobody wanted had become the lifeline of an army, carrying victory across devastated terrain, through danger and fatigue, mile by hard-won mile. Night had fallen over the French countryside, and the convoy of GMC CCKWs came to a temporary halt. Henderson sat in the cab, hands still gripping the steering wheel, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Yet his mind replayed the day's challenges. Mud, collapsed bridges, enemy fire, and mechanical failures had tested every truck, every driver. But the Red Ball Express had survived. The GMC CCKWs, once dismissed as underpowered and flawed, had proven themselves indispensable. Each truck carried not just fuel, ammunition, and rations, but the lifeblood of Patton's advancing Third Army. Without them, tanks would stall, troops would go hungry, and the momentum of the Allied advance could have faltered. Every mile completed was a testament to engineering, courage, and determination. Henderson looked along the line of trucks stretching into the darkness. African-American drivers, mechanics, and soldiers moved tirelessly, performing last-minute repairs and preparing for the next stretch. Their resilience and skill had turned skepticism into triumph. The convoy was more than a supply line. It was a symbol of perseverance, a rolling embodiment of teamwork and ingenuity. As dawn approached, Henderson reflected on the journey. The truck nobody wanted had become the backbone of one of the most daring logistical operations of World War II. It had carried an army forward, defied expectations, and proved that ingenuity and determination could overcome even the harshest conditions. The Red Ball Express would continue, mile after mile, supply after supply, until the Allied forces reached the heart of Germany. And in every mile, every delivery, the GMC CCKWs and the men who drove them would remain unsung heroes, quietly ensuring that victory was not just possible, but inevitable.